What's up guys, this is a super quick one for you. In this video, I'm gonna talk briefly about the variant property coming out of beta on the product option value object in Liquid. I was gonna add it as an update to the Shopify Liquid module at shopifythemedeveloper.com anyways, so I thought I might as well share it for free here on YouTube as well. Let's take a look at this new object now, and let's see what we can do with it. All right, guys, as mentioned, this shouldn't take too long. We're just going to be looking at this new variant property of product option value. But before we do that, let's take a step back and figure out how do we get to this particular object. So if we go up the chain of objects here in the documentation to product, if we cycle through, there should be an array here of options with values, which produces an array of product options. If we click on that, it'll take us to the next object definition here. And you can see here that inside of values, we have an array of this object right here, product option value. And then within product option value, we can access the variant object associated with that object. Okay, so it's nested pretty deep. And don't quote me on this, but I believe from memory that values used to just be text, and then this object came out, and then later came this variant property. Now, the reason why I know this is new is because when I covered it in the Shopify Javascript module on shopifythemedeveloper.com, you can see from the screenshot here that it was in beta when this course came out. But now if we look at the documentation, that notice saying it's in beta has been removed, and now it's in production and ready to go. And so naturally I decided to look into this and see what we can do with it. Now, one of the problems I've encountered with looping through product options and not knowing the associated variant, which we have access to now, is whether that option is sold out. So I've got an example from a previous project I worked on. I haven't worked on this one in years. I don't have access to their code base anymore, and they've made some changes, so it might not look perfect. But I remember working on this thing right here, which was the size selector and the width selector right here. And what the client wanted to happen was if a particular width or size was sold out, there should be a cross through it. Now, the problem with this is you can't have a value on an option as sold out. The only thing you can have as sold out is the variant, which includes all of the option values baked in. So what we would do here, I believe if I click on one of these, it should show up that it's unavailable in wide. So there you can see. So if I hit 14, it's going to say EE wide is unavailable. But if I go to 6, it's going to say available. So essentially what it's doing here is when I click 14, it's saying that this option value with this size, that combination, that variant is sold out. So it's not actually this, which is sold out, but the combination of this and this, which makes up the variant that is sold out. And in order to calculate this, what I had to do was every time that this option changed, we had to recalculate the variant and look at the variant object for these options if combined with the selection up here. So remembering this, I was thinking, could this new variant property on the product option value object help to solve this problem? So what I did was I went back into the project code for the Shopify Javascript module. This is freely available on the internet at this address. Obviously, to go through the course, you'll need to access the course, but the code is freely available on the internet here on the Shopify Theme Developer GitHub. So I opened that project up, and then I switched over to the branch where the cart functionality was built, 06 cart functionality. And then I ran my code base in the development store that I set up called JavaScript Demo Store. Let me increase the size here so it's very clear what I'm doing. And unfortunately, there's not enough space for it to be all on one line. But as you can see here, I'm using Shopify CLI to connect to that particular development store. So let's connect to that store by hitting enter on that. After it finishes syncing, I'm going to access that URL, and you can see here my super bare bones theme that I use for that training, okay? And if I go over to my first tab here, I've actually got the store open in my browser already, and I'm gonna go into the product section and I'm gonna access the product that we set up in that particular module, this t-shirt product. And if we scroll down, we can see that we've got multiple option parameters. Now, what we're experimenting with here is really only important when you have multiple option parameters. If you have a single option parameter, then you can simply cycle through the variants and each option is equal to a different variant, and that makes it very easy. Remember, when it comes to variants, if we have multiple option parameters, the variant represents a combination of these options and values. So if we have 4 potential values in the first option and 3 in the second option, that will equal 12 different variants because we have to account for all possible combinations. As you can see here, there's 12 variants. Okay, so let's go and access that product on our store here. It's just products/t-shirt. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of space here. So what I'm going to do is just update my window size. All right, so to just briefly cover what we set up in the course, if I click here and I change my option here, you can see that we have enabled variant switching functionality. So obviously this doesn't look beautiful as it's not a CSS course, but in the module we learn how we can use JavaScript to figure out what variant is selected. And then we can change things on the page, including the price, including the variant image based on the newly selected variant. Now, of course, because this is updating without me having to reload the page, this is clearly happening in JavaScript. And we can see the code for this if we go into, I believe, assets product.js. So let me bring this down a little bit so we can see a little bit more. And as you can see here, I have this all running through a web component called product page that wraps the entire product page over here. You can see here. And in terms of the Liquid implementation, what I'm doing is I'm just looping through all of the product options. Like I said, I believe that this value object in product option values used to just be string. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's just going off memory. But now that it's an object, we have other attributes on it or other properties on it like selected, which helps us to determine whether that product option is currently selected or not, which is quite handy. So obviously I've got the option to load selected if it is selected at the Liquid level. But of course, this all changes based on the user input, the user interactivity with the form, and that is all handled within this web component. So if we briefly cover this, we have a event listener on the input event anywhere on the form, and then we run update variant. So here you can see inside of update variant, we find the current variant by running this method right here, variant from option values. We're able to grab the option value of each option and then look it up in the list of variants, return that, and then now that we know our new variant, we can make all those UI changes to the page and also update the history state so we can add in the selected variant ID to the URL. As I change the variant ID changes up here as well. So if this is all already possible using JavaScript, what benefit can we find of using this variant property on product option value? Again, the idea that I had for making use of this variant object goes back to that example I showed you earlier with this size selector. If we now have access to the associated variant on that particular option value, then perhaps we might be able to make a feature like this a little bit more robust. Let's experiment with that now. So obviously we have here, we don't have selects, we don't have drop downs. We have essentially what are radio buttons behind the hood, but obviously they show up as a little grid here. But these are, if we take a look at the code, these are all just radio buttons, okay? So we need to, first of all, transform our code over here to radio buttons. So if I go over to my HTML in my product.liquid section, and in order to save time, I'm just going to copy and paste code in here. So I'm going to take the select, all of the select code right here, and replace it with a div of the class of radio buttons, which is just going to group together all of the radio inputs, okay? So if we make sure to save that and look over here, now you'll see we got dot points for each option parameter instead. Okay, so if I click a new value within the first parameter, it's obviously going to swap out the previous value in that particular parameter. And as you can see, we're taking advantage of the selected property to determine whether it should be checked on page load. So if I'm selecting this particular variant, so let's just select blue and medium, this is not going to work because the variant ID isn't actually updating because we haven't programmed our new UI to work with the web component. But essentially what would happen if we did do that would be the variant ID would update up here. And then when we reload the page, the correct options will be selected for that particular variant. That's nothing new. We had that already. But what we have here is
inside the label, we're taking advantage of the new variant property and the available property within the returned variant object to give the class of sold out to that option. Okay, so we haven't styled this yet, so I'll just write it directly into the template because we don't have a CSS file. And as you can see here, I'm just going to put a strike through on the sold out labels and reduce the opacity. So if we go back here to our code on the front end, you can see on page load with the current variant selected of this particular variant, that variant, we have some sold out values. Now, of course, like I mentioned, values themselves can't be sold out. So what is the variant object here being determined as? If we go back to the documentation, you can see that the variant will be the one associated with this option value combined with the other currently selected option values if one exists. Okay, so essentially what we've got here is this variant for the second option parameter is a small. So red is going to be sold out in small. Okay, and then in terms of medium and large, because they're crossed out here, and then for these ones, the associated variant would be the variants that have medium with the currently selected value for the other option parameter, which is white. So medium and large are obviously sold out when combined with white. Okay, so this is cool. This gives us some functionality that we didn't have beforehand, but the problem here is that it's still at the Liquid level. We only have this at page load. What this means is that we still need JavaScript if we want to affect our front end after page load. So obviously this is not great UX if I want to select something else. Like if I select blue, these sold out properties aren't going to update like we saw in this example, which is using JavaScript. So we still need to use JavaScript. Now, how do we do that inside of this particular module? And the way that a lot of Shopify themes do it is we include right here a script tag with the variant information of the product formatted into JSON format. And then we take that up here and we put that, if we look right here, we take that inner text, we parse it, and then we have that as objects, okay? And that's how we're able to look up a variant against the selected option values. So I'm just going to, I forgot to put the console log here, but I'm going to put console log and we'll console log this dot variance on the page load or when the component is loaded. So if I go over here to my console, you can see there's an array of 12 items here. And as you can see, we get all of this information simply by writing over here product.variance filtered with the JSON filter. Now, if we look back at this, we can see that the associated variant of each option is not included in this particular array. And that kind of makes sense because we're already looking at an array of variants. How it typically works is we have a list of all the possible variants, and then we match the variant based on the options that are selected. So we read from the UI what options have been selected, and then we match it with a variant, rather than having a variant object attached to a particular value. Because as mentioned, a variant comes from a particular combination of option values, not from a single option value. So I wanted to take this as far as it could go. Maybe there was something here that I was missing. So what I did was I found another way to feed this information into JavaScript, and then I combined it with this variance array right here. So I'm not going to go into how I wrote the code. I'm just going to copy and paste it for you guys. So right under here, under product.variance.json, obviously that didn't come through with the variant property on the product options. But what I can do here is paste in my own constructed JSON, an array of product variants, all of the variants on this product with its ID and its option availability, as you can see here. So we're just going through all three options. If it exists, then we're getting the name of it, and then we're looking at whether it's available. But again, this is at the Liquid level. So this is only going to show available if it's available matched against the currently selected variant at page load. So then what I did was I came over here, and just like I've done for this one, I parsed that second bit of JSON in the exact same way. And then I combined that array with the original variance array matching on the ID. So if I look at this dot variance now in our console right here, you can see that I now have option 1 with availability. So we can see here that black is true when S is selected. But the thing here is that this is all still at the Liquid level. So it helps on page load, but there is no replacement for JavaScript in the sense that if I change this, it doesn't change my array of variants here that I generated on page load. So already these properties that I just added to each variant object in this variance array are already out of date. So yeah, this basically does not make any sense why you would do this. So I don't recommend doing this at all. This is just me experimenting, trying to see what we can do with this new object, but this does not provide us, as far as I can tell, any new benefits. The only benefit of this new object that I can tell, and I'm just removing all these changes here and just going back to the Liquid level here, the only benefit I can see is that we're able to get some information on page load about what options are available against other options based only on the variant that is loaded on page load. So again, variant selection is a highly interactive thing, and for that reason, we need to use JavaScript for it. This new property on the product option value object right here allows us to figure out some stuff at the Liquid level on page load, but like I mentioned, it does not replace the need for JavaScript here, and there's really not much else to be said about it. So that's where I'll leave you today, guys. No outro for this one. I'll just leave a link to the repository and the relevant module for you to check out if you're watching this one on YouTube. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next video.